Hey, Dr. Lisa here, Lisette Alvarez Holland from Mind Body Enterprises. Um, I am starting up this second YouTube channel. For many years, was on my Lisa Alvarez Holland page with my first company, Belly Guru, and all of the informative women's health and maternal wellness and all of that. The past couple of years, I've been working in leadership development because I kept going upstream, looking at systems. I am a systems thinker, and in understanding what the heck, why can't the U.S. take care of its women? It naturally led me into more holistic studies than rehabilitation medicine, pre-med into rehabilitation medicine and athletic training, sports therapy, orthopedics, hardcore, lots of testosterone driven competitive mindset. And then I did a 180 into women's health after my own pregnancy and realizing the deficits in there. And also understanding that if mamas ain't happy, then the entire care economy falls. And everything we got going on in business and entrepreneurship, which I moved into, wanting to create this kind of life I envisioned for myself in leadership without having to pay the mommy tax, which is so apparent, which you cannot avoid because of the system. But I wanted to, like many women, Gen X, um, create my utopia, right? And I tried my best doing it inside the confines of the healthcare model. But medicine was never, or at least allopathic medicine, the industrialization of Western medicine was never built upon the two things I was in the business of, which was well being and community, uh, community health, because being a woman living in this body is political in nature. Unfortunately, until men stop telling me that they can jump on top of me and enter me and rip out my organs at their whim, I would love to not talk politics and just take care of people, but that was never afforded me in being a woman, even in the U.S. And I thank God every day I was born in the U.S. in the 70s and was able to live out that life because we were so close. We were so close, but here we are. And so I understood that we need the right leadership. Leadership development is really non-existent inside healthcare. The people that get it are the physicians. And unfortunately, the way the system was set up, and let me say, I am not anti medicine. Unfortunately, I am anti everything being emergencies and urgencies and waiting until we have a disease state before we intervene. And so that's just part of being part of rehab medicine. And that's why I actually left pre med and moved into rehabilitation medicine. And I think initially my undergrad being in athletic training was because I wanted to add to it with physical therapy eventually, which is what I ended up entering allied health with. And then move that up to the doctor of physical therapy as the profession did because I wanted to be part of the improvement in healthcare. And I wanted to be part of that conversation and practicing at the highest level, a clinical doctorate of any academic degree is really where you want to be so that you can kind of move between research and critical thinking as well as the civics as well as the social determinants of health is not going to be treated in the clinic because in the clinic you're talking finances, unfortunately. And I understood all that and went into entrepreneurship. And I did understand that leadership was needed, particularly in the arena of women's health that I had moved into, um, because all of health, and we have the research to show it, all of health begins in the womb. And so if you are not, just like it would be completely ridiculous, although we are trying our best here in the US right now to reverse everything we progressed in. it really is completely ridiculous to think of human beings and human health being conducted, being delivered inside a system and a world that is full of environmental toxins and unregulated in terms of how we produce products that we lather all over us, that we ingest in our system. But like I said, unfortunately, US economics and the government right now that we have, um, which is questionable as a valid government if you were to define it in civics and government. Um, but what we have right now is basically winner takes all, and the winner is financial power and control. And humans don't really matter, especially in a world of AI where we'll just replace them because the five biggest voices in AI probably didn't have girlfriends or boyfriends. The people who are funding them, um, like Peter Thiel, people like that are. They think they've transcended. They don't. They don't. They're not even thinking. They're thinking they're like above human beings right now. So like, we are not on the same page. And I truly, truly started this channel because I believe physicians are compromised. They sold out, unfortunately, as much as I want to help them. And I do want to show them how to have a member based practice like I did, and how to be direct to public and to get out of the thumb of their insurance company, venture capitalist public equity companies that promised them the world, and pharmaceuticals that promised them the world, and they sold themselves out as legal drug pushers. I want to help them, but the reality is that they were built into a system where they were the one and only gatekeeper, and they're suffering right now because they allowed the squelching of every other allied health. They promoted and allowed themselves to be in a position of authority at the expense of community health, and they developed the monster. And they're right there. The reason I feel like I have a unique position is that I'm also and have been in the women's empowerment conversation for 2 decades now, where I was speaking the same poison in feminism. Unfortunately, third wave feminism got us in, got us competing, but there was a buying into it. And what Sheryl Sandberg from Meta, kind of Meta fame, she had a book, Lean In, and everyone that ran to this book, Lean In, I was just watching that and being like, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. And as Cheryl's finding out right now with the cancellation of the whole Lady Boss and the whole Lean In thing, is that we were supposed to go in, extract from the extractive system what was depleting us as women, what was never fair, what was never designed for us, take the information of understanding what could work in a different perspective, extract that, and build a better model, in the words of Buckminster Fuller. And I believe we're there right now in terms of AI and healthcare. I believe we're there in terms of leadership and authority in healthcare. And community health in that conversation is a different arm of the healthcare conversation. It is not the medicine conversation. And so I'm pro allied health. I'm pro horizontal authority. I'm pro many gatekeepers. I'm pro the way we worked our best in the 90s, before the reduction of rehabilitative medicine. It was all of us, all of the professions sitting at the table twice a week, early morning conferences, maybe a late afternoon conference, what's going on the floor, the whole factor of subacute care, which was between medicine and launching them out into the community structures. That was completely destroyed by insurance company, by managed health, by a third payer model. I witnessed all of this in the body of a woman, in the body of a woman carrying children, in the body of a woman carrying children who is going to now pay the mommy tax for the rest of her career. Um, and unfortunately, the writing was on the wall for many women like me who are now in our 50s, maybe early 60s. Honestly, too vital. We've been doing the wellness. We bought into the Oprah Winfrey uh, self-help books of the mid to late 90s. For whatever reason, there's a group of us, and I'm going to call us the Cassandras of healthcare, the Cassandras of the care economy, that are not just, many of us ended up in healthcare because we were the canaries in the coal mine early on in the 90s, in understanding, in being invaginated, in early health tech, healthcare, very early integrative health that then turned into functional medicine and everything. Very early in understanding the female athlete triad, that is actually more of a quad now. Um, the the losses that were going on in the world of maternal health, despite the advancement and the expenses happening in health. Many of us, because we understood trauma and drama very intimately, went into healthcare because that was our option at the time. There really were not wellness finance people, right? Financial wellness people. There really were not people in economics that were allowed. Women in economics and finance were not allowed to be anything but the lipstick patriarchy, to be perfectly honest. I mean, they're just getting out of that mold. And I think healthcare was the first avenue where we could develop a discipline of women's health, where we really could say that whole idea of the feminine, taking it out of a feminist model, which was really just the lipstick patriarchy when it wasn't extracted out. It was kind of like putting, I always say it's like putting high heels and pink and lipstick on the patriarchy and then holding up the whole system because you ended up having proximity and priorities, and you thought up until now, unfortunately, American women thought up until very much right now, 2026, 2025, they thought they were safe, especially if you were a white, wealthy woman. You thought you were safe. It's time to admit it. And so all of these narratives now are embedded in a woman. It's the feminine alchemy right now because we're carrying the load of it. We're carrying the consequences. We birthed the kids that are now Gen Z in a mess, relationally, financially, socially, physically. Um, we got ourselves better. Thank God we were, trying to feed them good food and this and that. But some of the people didn't end up with an almond mom. They are repeating um, a lot of the drama and trauma conversations that were not halted by their Gen X moms or their older millennial moms. We have older millennial women, Gen X women who, like I said, are too vital right now in the wisdom, in understanding the public's understanding or lack thereof of all the narratives I've just discussed, which is a lot. We were both the architects and we're owning it. We're owning it because we cannot own our health without it. We understand the narrative layers need to be, the public needs to understand. It needs to be human centered as we're bringing in AI and making this accessible. It needs to remain emotionally relevant and resonant so that we can counter what's going on right now, which is no guardrails, We just see that just this past week, Meta and Google held accountable for creating and understanding they were creating a big problem with mental health, addictions, and just buying into all of that for the benefit of consumerism and the control of the. I mean, we have a market right now that is completely falsified. This isn't a free trade. The markets are manipulated. And the people that are manipulating the markets are also manipulating the healthcare and are also manipulating the education system and are also manipulating the religious organizations and are also manipulating the narratives and the propaganda to get emotional buy-in for sales. Like we lost the plot of being humans on this earth. We lost the plot. Um, we lost the plot of healthcare. I'm concerned we've lost the plot of healthcare if we roll it out towards optimization and automations for the back office and the front office before we really take hold of understanding what our position right now in health is, being like the hospitals and the community health right now. This is why I'm talking really not to medicine anymore. I'm talking to healthcare, but I'm talking to this arm of community health that was completely destroyed by how the oligarchs of the early 1900s created an industry of health and wellness. So there's the Cassandra paradox in that. And if you don't know the Cassandra paradox, that is the mythology, the story that I think it's from Greek mythology, that Zeus was enamored, favored Cassandra, the human, gave her all the powers of wisdom. Pretty much, it's like another variation. We turned it into Eve and the apple and the serpent having her the apple like of knowledge, right? The sin in that, the sin in that was that she wouldn't take Zeus's advances. Every woman who's been in a room with a bunch of men deciding, like if you only need to watch the show Mad Men, and I did a Substack on that. You should go see my Substack and read that. But you know, you were allowed in the room in a certain capacity in the 1950s and 60s. And as the women's right movement came in, you were allowed to be in leadership in a certain capacity. And so as the 80s and the 90s moved in, now we started just accelerating and being like, look, I got better SAT scores. What's your excuse going to be? I did the surgery much better. I discovered this. I discovered that. And now we have the 2000s and social media. And now I don't even have to worry about you not putting me on your TV show. I don't need you to publish my book. I'm just going to go right out there and talk about it myself. And so all the Cassandras now have a voice. And the Cassandra paradox was where she was shut up. She wasn't shut up. You can't disempower somebody who innately has a power and an authority. But what you can do is make her using her authority, or make that person using their excellence seem like a sin. And that's basically what religion has done. And that's basically what patriarchy has done. And that's basically what, to some extent, the enslavement of peoples through colonization and empire has been to see potential and then just take it from that person or those people and decide you own it because of a superiority and all of that. So I understand we're adding AI right now is just another narrative for that same stuff. It's just another narrative for that same stuff. People are limited, people get tired, people get overwhelmed, And so we're going to add robotics and automations. And then, people can't process as fast as computers. Computers can't even process all the different data points as well. So we're going to add AI. We're going to add an artificial layer. I mean, because that's all it is, right? Technology is an artificial layer to put the value of human more and more on our productivity and our fiscal contributions. And so, being a woman, that's been our story the whole time, fighting that philosophy. They just wrapped it up in different things. And so I understand that. So my company, Mind Body Enterprises, was really looking at how could I bring the people who understand mind and body and understand how that's involved in enterprise, whether you be through entrepreneurship in whatever industry you're coming in, but really in healthcare, because whatever mess we create, guess what? Healthcare is going to have to clean it up. Whether we're under a dictatorship, an authoritarian regime, whether we're under a democracy of a republic or a true democracy, whether we're under Marxism or whatever, like if there's people, there's going to be health and well-being attempted by humans because they want to live. They want to survive. Okay. Unfortunately, if you have a power dynamic that minimizes the humanity of people and sees people outside of a very few as tools towards their authority and their well-being and their pleasure at the expense of everyone else's pain, now we have what's called sociopathy. Now we have what's called pathology. And that's where we are. And the people, again, that need to clean that up are the people in healthcare that see it. And so not only is there this narrative public conversation layer, which I will come on my public channels such as YouTube to discuss to some extent, my Owning Her Health podcast, we'll now talk about these systems instead of just her symptoms, because again, we are not going to heal her by just her symptoms. We're not going to have the menopause book and the menopause cures and everything's going to be okay for these women who are the Cassandras in the coal mine right now. Because we're talking about things that need to disrupt systems that have gone awry, that are never going to be healthy. And so I know that we need to have engaged humans. And I need to identify and enroll the people already ready to act at this point. There are plenty of health coaches for those symptoms. There are plenty of traditional medicine providers for those systems, for the system that is. I'm building through Mind Body Enterprises a project that our initial projects focused back where I began as the Belly Guru, which was my original thought authority, on maternal health and well-being, on the woman's health of a lifetime, that you need the girl, you need the infant, you need the girl, you need the puberty to go well in order to even have a maternal conversation in terms of maternal wellness. But the maternal energy needs to be in all of us. And guess what? It is. But not under an order of socialization that literally teaches everyone who's identified as a man or a boy how not to be feminine, how not to use any feminine characteristics. And that's unfortunately where we are. It's not healthy. So there's a level of action for everyone. There's a level for the women who are the mothers. There's a level of action for the women who are the caretakers, not just of the children, but of themselves, of their systems, of their parents right now, the elderly population who has the wisdom. I'm moving into my matriarchal era, right? Like I'm no longer the maiden, the fertile maiden, in even the economics. Ageism is real. I'm in a position where my children are young adults, but look at the world we're leaving them. AI is promising that their degree means nothing. So there's an action layer. There's the narratives going on, and there's an action layer. And I hope that this channel can speak to that. Then there's the systems level that I've alluded to already, the infrastructure and the policy. My projects around women, because everyone comes from a woman. If we get that right, everyone benefits. Everyone benefits. Just like if I get the world, if the environment's healthy, everything in the environment gets healthier. Again, we are working right now, unfortunately, inside a system that has gone awry because it is a cancer. We have a tumor right now, which is the extractive predator class. That's the cells in this tumor that are coming together or attempting to come together on a geopolitical order that is trying to convince the rest of the world, the body, that give me all your blood, give me all of your nutrition, keep the tumor, keep our cells alive, because we're going to create this huge other entity that's going to be good for all of the body, right? People who are in healthcare, who understand oncology, who understand even oncology beyond what we're actually selling in the US system, at least, because unfortunately that's been corrupted by the monetization and all the people wanting to make money off of cancer, not cure, but cancer care. We understand that that AI bubble is an AI tumor, and it's inside a capitalistic tumor, and that's inside a authoritarian tumor right now. So like, we understand what we're dealing with at a systems and infrastructure level. We understand us in healthcare right now. I can't convey how much the leadership of today needs to come from people who have worked in healthcare, clinicians, administrators, because the leadership of healthcare has come out of clinicians moving into leadership. And like I said, it was built on a gatekeeping authority system, a vertical. Community health, what I'm teaching and what this channel is going to be really focusing on, is at the systems level. We're not anti-medicine. It's just that is very clearly desiring to maintain on a vertical. Community health is horizontal, and not only that, it's concentric, and it centers on its most vulnerable. And that right now in the healthcare conversation, in the medicine conversation, is talked about and marketed, but not actually implemented. That's the conversation about cancer, focusing on immunotherapies and the elimination and the cure of the toxins, and eating for the cure and the prevention of ever having to care for cancer. Those people and those leaders, it's very real. They have been disappearing. They have been in the early, around the early forge of the functional medicine industry, rising up and threatening the established medical paradigm. There were a lot of natural health leaders who died an early death. I mean, look into all this yourself. I'm not speaking conspiracy right now. I'm talking infrastructure. When you want to destroy a strong cancer, you go and you take away, you try to cut it out of the system. And if it's a tumor and it's invaginated into too many organs, it's really hard to do that. And what you do is the cancer's mentality is to create other blood vessels and to invaginate so many systems that you can't remove the cancer without killing the host. And the best way to do that is to basically take over the organs and make those organs dysfunctional. There's no logic to it. I hope you see there's no logic to it. There is no logic to what we're being sold. I'm not anti-AI. There's great potential of it. I'm not anti-tech. There's great potential out of it. I'm not anti-medicine. There's great potential of it. I'm not anti-pharmaceuticals. Great potential of it. But we've all seen where it's gone, right? We do understand that the design of business, especially in an extractive capital unregulated system, which is basically what big business keeps wanting to pay people to have, is that the rules don't apply to me. They only apply to what feeds me and gives me and buys me assets and lets me hoard the entire system. I get it. There's no logic in it because eventually the player will play themselves into a corner and either be completely by themselves and therefore have nothing to extract from, or they will in the process eat one another, extract from one another so much that everything collapses. It's a sociopathic, pathological logic. And AI in itself is wonderful. Generative AI probably will not see a use case for its own creators. So the system has many layers, and we need to really be looking at AI in healthcare, healthcare in general. What's the new infrastructure and policies for community health? Because they're not going to be from the minds of medicine right now. Not right now. I believe if we do that correctly, if we do allied health as the horizontal many gateways, not gatekeepers, but many gateways, if we create a parallel system that is not dependent on the venture capitalists and public equity invagination that healthcare corporations have become, healthcare insurance corporations have become, then we will have what Buckminster Fuller reasoned as the better model. Because he was speaking in the 1960s that, we have enough. We just need a better infrastructure to transport the food, but we literally have enough global food to feed everyone. We haven't gotten there yet because we've made it financially incentivized to keep poverty in places where we want the resources. I want to be talking about the scaffolding. So on top of that infrastructure, when we build a better building, this is where we get into the architecture and my projects under Mind Body Enterprises, whereas they were kind of focused on leadership and women's authority for negotiations to keep them in the system and be able to, again, extract out the best that we learned through third wave feminism, being at those same tables, but build a better system that includes men who are willing to work as partners instead of be our projects or take over everything, includes the children instead of, keeping them in a bubble where they're dysfunctional. If we're going to build a building, we're going to need scaffolding because every day we're not going to be at the end of that building phase, right? We're going to need to start small and digestible. And that's what I intend my Owning Her Health podcast to be. There will be more elaborate expansions on that for the infrastructure I discussed and changing the narratives inside my my more intimate communities. So some of that will be written in the Owning Her Health Afterglow podcast, in the Owning Her Health Afterglow Substack. Um, the paid supporters that are supporting me to do this, to keep this production here on YouTube, to keep the production of the Substack going, will have a private podcast in there opportunity, which will be held. My vision for it is to allow there to be much more roundtable, two-way discussion with my audience. Who is my audience? The Cassandras. Right now, you are probably in middle management inside healthcare systems, and you're just like, you know, you feel trapped in that. And maybe you've been pushed out. Maybe you're a woman of color, of the, what, 600,000 Black women and women of color and marginalized folks that have been pushed out since the beginning of 2025. You were the ones doing DEI conversations. You were the one creating community health and wellness coalitions and financial incentives. And now your public funding is being cut, and you were the person doing the research on rare diseases and really getting gains in cancer curatives and researching women's health, and you just got a footing because we only started specifically funding and wanting to back the research on women in the mid 90s. And so, 20 years later, you were just getting your footing. And all of that is being destroyed right now by insecurity and by a predator class that inevitably is going to eat itself. Like, it's going to end bad for everyone. And you see that. And while I speak to healthcare, because it's the project and the template that I feel is most disruptive, most impactful, which is why I focused Belly Guru on maternity care and women's health, as opposed to the 10 years of orthopedics and sports medicine and high performance. That's where the money was. That's where the money was for me to create an elite center for women athletes that, looked at their biopsychosocial profile or whatever. That's still where the money is for somebody. But it's this problem in the infrastructure of health authority, why we don't have those centers. It's because the women who are giving the care, that understand the biopsychosocial of healthcare, are all focused in women's health so much wanting to care for their clients, that they're not in the leadership, they're not in the middle management. And the people who are in the middle management, who have a voice in the hospital system, in medicine, in the big care clinics with the big names, in the big, research hospitals, schools, and academics, the bureaucracy above them is not letting them speak, because they're saying things. And unfortunately, we know through the Cassandra syndrome that is studied and researched, people, especially established in authority, get very comfortable, and the predator class is that anyone who is funding those systems doesn't want to hear the alternative, does not want to deal with being taken off their position. They see it as a threat. And so the coherence needs to be there in small, digestible projects, one of which I will want to fund through Mind Body Enterprises, the maternal health, community health template. But if we do that template well, we can give that template to any group, because my template's going to integrate the food community health conversation and the education health conversation. And all of that is being tied together right now with AI and tech. We can't avoid it. These aren't separate conversations. My fear is that we politicize everything so much that nothing gets done. We have all round tables, which is what I saw in healthcare and why I had to leave. Listen, I brought my maternal health capacity and conversation to make money and to make a market to my hospital system. The bureaucracy couldn't see how I could get paid on the maternity floor as a PT back in 2011 or so when I was trying to bring that conversation. I had been in my business, The Belly Guru, for 5, 6 years. And I was said, look, I don't have the manpower. I'm part-time. I'm raising my kids. Can we do this together? Can I bring basically what I've kind of created in the seed of Belly Guru of a direct access, allied health, direct to market, physical therapy has direct access. How can we bring that community health project that I was manning in my business into the healthcare system that I was in, which at the time was Novant Health here in the Carolinas? They couldn't see it. My department head saw it, believed in me, but didn't know how we were going to get it through the bureaucracy because that was nursing. That was called nursing. And that's been called nursing and education. Everything in the hospital's nursing. Unless you're inside physical therapy care, then you can be giving patient education and bill for it. There was no way for it to work. I had to leave the hospital system to then contract into individual OBGYN offices. And even then, I had to make sure they understood that just because I'm talking about more holistic management, I was not trying to talk about their competition. I was not trying to take women away from them. It's insane. It's insane that people in healthcare are competing against one another. But that's where we are, guys. That's where we are because big business took over healthcare and medicine bought into it. And so we need to extract out allied health again. We need to extract out peer and community health circles from that. And we need to, and honestly, we've already done it. Rehab, that's what my Mind Body Brand Academy was under the Belly Guru. I was teaching people to extract themselves out of the payer system to be able to expand not only how they could deliver community health, but also increase their revenue streams because being under the third-party system was reducing our reimbursements. So all of that was scaffolding. All of that was little coherent wins before the pandemic. Unfortunately, the pandemic shoved everything back into the medicine conversation, shoved everything back into the government conversation, shoved everything back into the economic conversation of literally, honestly, right now, we see strategically Project 2025 wants to pull all of that back into the conversations that were being had post-Nixon. Post-Nixon. So late 70s, Reaganomics, all of that here in the US. And the world that we were dealing with was the Cold War era, the kind of war mentality. It was not the progress of the World Health Organization. It was not the progress of NATO conversations. It was, and I'm not saying these organizations are, again, I don't want to make this political. It's just that when you're literally letting people like my daughter risk her, like when you're trying to take over her body and putting public policy on it, now you've made womanhood political. And it's always been political. We haven't extracted ourselves. Being Black has always been political in America. Being Hispanic has always been political in America. When you took over Puerto Rico, when the government, which still has it basically functioning as a colony, although it's called a territory, we all know how we use syntax, right? Which is why the LLMs are being pushed. We have to be concerned about that because they're creating syntax, which then enables culture. They're large language models. That's why we call it AI, because we don't want to market their large language models, large syntax creating models of an alternate intelligence. That would sound really scary, right? Once you do that, all of this scaffolding now becomes multidimensional. And so I'm hoping my platform and my podcast conversations, we will now have people in state governance. We will now be talking of owning her health through education, owning her health through economics, owning her health through, I'm not probably going to talk about it through religion, but I will talk about it through spiritual development and those religious people who can hold that conversation, then they are welcome on my podcast, Owning Her Health, as well. They are welcome to maybe, be featured on some things that we discuss and offer here on this channel. Then there's the level of, after the scaffolding, understanding that all of this, the way I hope to use AI is to create my own platform where we could put the book of this on there, because it's ultimately the alternative playbook. How do we play the alternative playbook that is not about competition? It's about evolution. And how do we change the frame from being the best and only into back to humanity? Because honestly, back in 2014, I had created my cards for kind of going more into being Dr. Lisa versus being the belly guru, under that intent of being a role model leader and having these conversations in how do we become leaders of community health. We can't just throw that to the people who are advocates and public policy making and then wonder why it never transcribes into what we see on the treatment tables. We're going to need now, more than ever, with the reorganization of even people's, careers. It's not going to be about your individual skill sets that can be automated and reproduced, and your efficiency in that. Like, all that did was prepare for your replacement. All it did, making humans a robot and getting awards and pats on the back for being basically a robot 24/7, whether it was what we call, right, the movie Stepford Wives, that literally was about creating women, taking the real women and getting the humanity out of them, but giving every man the perfect puppet that they don't have to actually evolve as human beings to be in relationships with them. I don't know how babies are supposed to be. I guess they put them all in a farm. Like the horrors of that. Literally, there are people who don't like people, who are the majority of the billionaires who are developing AI right now to be anti-human. I mean, they can sell it all they want. They're not stupid. They know they need to sell this. But ultimately, I'd say, I think I'm going to reference in the show notes, in my Substack, a talk I just heard between Tristan Harris, and he's the Center for, I got to get that name right. I'll have it in the show notes. But basically, he's big on, look, let's not ignore where the people who are developing this AI, what their mindset is and what their thoughts for their future and their, you cannot be in the predator class that they are and not be very self-centered. You do not get there on a mission of humanity first, people first. And we all know that. And you do not get true intended healthcare being on a mission that's not humanity first, people first. And so there, like there's a commonality of it. And Tristan was having a conversation with um Kira Schweitzer, who is she wrote the book on like being in tech and understanding that the tech bros and that whole mentality and the red pill culture kind of coming in that community. It started in that community of millennial men who felt really slighted and divided from socializing with their peers to begin with, who are really into tech and really into computers, but they really don't like people. And I mean, you only have to see, right? Like, you got to look at the relationships of and the mentality of fathering so many children and listening to Elon Musk and then being like, Peter Thiel, he wants to live forever. He had a really hard time coming out with his sexuality and his homosexuality. And then it was like just outed on him. I mean, that's wounding. Like there's people moving from their wounds. I don't know who Sam Altman is with, but I don't see him with anyone. That concerns me. Like, I'm not saying everybody needs to be in some like relationship, but I am saying that science has shown that biologically and sociologically and psychologically, we are a social being. And there has been a lot of drugs pushed when you're not that way. And we used to have lobotomies to work on that. And we literally still have something called a hysterectomy because women going through their hormonal shifts and also being quite uncomfortable and unhappy when they were sold off as children to become tools of reproducing, and they weren't happy after 5 kids and literally were called hysterical. And the correction was, well, now that you had the 5 kids, we're going to remove your uterus because it's useless. They didn't understand hormones. Like, we literally still live in a world in 2026 where we're trying to sell AI for healthcare on data sets that still has the syntax, the language of hysterectomies in it. So do you see at this unique place I stand? As a systems thinker, not just because I'm a woman, because I literally am non-neuronormative for many reasons, trauma being one of them. But I did the work years ago. I'm not perfect, nor do I want to be, but I've done enough of the inner infrastructure, scaffolding, and narrative work to understand we need to design AI to magnify relational intelligence, not hierarchy models. We don't need to collapse and replace humans. We need to expand them. And that means expanding humanity. And I have not seen that be the objective of the technocrats, shoving it down our throats, because unfortunately they've bought themselves into governance. The US government can be sold. We saw it with Nixon, and it's been that way ever since. The US healthcare model, the US healthcare system can be sold. We saw that with pharmaceuticals and with private equities. And before that, we saw that with healthcare companies, the healthcare insurance companies. The healthcare insurance companies very quickly got into the business of being health corporations. All of this, Your churches can be sold. Your synagogues can be sold. In fact, the entire country of Israel was created as a sold state. These are very real truths that unfortunately are being made into a section called politics, that, again, the tumor called politics, that keeps reproducing itself. And we keep discussing how much bigger and bigger it gets, but nobody actually talks about the cure because the people funding the cancer don't want the cure. They want to keep the care going. Does that eliminate their ability? Does that eliminate their risk of cancer? Absolutely not. When they get cancer, let me tell you, they're going to eat right. They're not going to eat the food that Monsanto sprays on. They're not going to allow for chemicals and plastics in their water system. They're not going to have any of that they say is A-OK for operations right now. They don't do it now. Listen, the e-file shows that they're literally possibly having a ring of eliminating children so they can extract the blood and pump it into themselves. This is who we're dealing with. I'm in danger coming on here publicly and saying it. So I need to have an economic infrastructure that allows me to deal with that. This is the very real thing. And so, no, I will not be publicly speaking any more in depth about anything more than I've said on this YouTube. I can't. It's dangerous. There are journalists that have been killed for bringing the news. That's where we are. The more I make sense publicly, the more at risk I am. But there will be places and infrastructure and scaffolding and narratives in more intimate circles. Do you need to buy yourself in? To some extent, I will take your money when you're ready, but there's a screening process. No, I'm not just taking money randomly. For that, there's the Substack. That's a safe exchange. That's still fairly public. I'm asking for $10 a month, $97 a year to basically, if you hear my conviction, if what I say on my YouTube and in my Substack makes sense to you in any of the public access, then I'm inviting you to come into the other conversations and see if you're enrolled in that. But it's also a two-way screening. People have to understand that. I give access to me because I'm getting to know you, because if you just write me a check, it's going to be towards the public initiatives. It's going to be towards getting the lawyers and writing the public policy and putting up the website and doing the things in full transparency of what that is for. But no, you cannot buy me. You cannot buy me. That's my whole point. If I could be bought, I would have started the clinic after my 10 years in women's athlete-focused functional medicine, and I'll even take care of the woman athlete whose sport now has become pregnancy. That's a great business model. I right now would rather be paid to consult with you for you to go and build that, because I don't believe right now where I'm at in my age, the legacy I want to leave is a template. I don't believe staying in the clinic is of benefit, because the legacy I want to leave is a template for people to take it and run. Because I have no idea idea where this is going now. I don't know if it's going to take another 20 years for people to hear me. I know it took me 20 years for people to hear me when I started talking about mind, body, health. I know it took me 30 years when I was talking about mind, body, and the health of systems. I am hoping I can figure out a way for AI to collapse that timeline into a common space. But I'm 53, going to be 54 years old. I've got a lot of life in me, but there's billionaires who are against my success, ultimately. I understand the game. So when you enter in, if you're really serious about this resonating, if you understand you're one of the people, even in a different industry than healthcare, and you really do want to know me and build whatever you're building with anything I got to support you on that, either as consult or XIR, which is like, executive in residence for a certain part of the project, which right now is probably how do I onboard AI without listening to all these tech bros, without feeding into the disease of the system, without feeding into the capitalist agenda. Like, how do I use it to actually maintain my authority and make my systems the better system that one day we can create and have the better model? That eventually even the most narcissistic, capitalistic, money hungry, power hungry person may look at it. And quite honestly, if they want to eliminate us in the project and take it over, but they'll actually use it, we know that that can't exist. That won't exist under the mindset. But if we can create more women leaders who have that maternal authority already set, and we can take care of them, which is what my communities are, and then have projects that welcome the men and have programs and people who create the projects for men. Wonderful. But that's an interview on my part as much as I'm an interview on yours. And I think that's what's very different about me and why we're kind of moving out of that influencer economy. And I'm talking about a care economy and monetizing that, because for so many centuries, so much of the care economy has been free labor, free emotional labor, free physical labor, free spiritual labor, free financial labor, because people have taken, stolen, killed for it. Our ideas, our ideologies, our perspectives, that ends now. That's the legacy I want to be part of. That's not a gender exclusive conversation, meaning I'm not anti-men in that. But come on, even the men that understand what I'm saying right now and will be part of our projects, bringing their projects into our projects and linking them, are men I don't need to explain this to. They see it just like me. They see the patriarchy didn't work out for them. They see the lies in giving people an inferiority complex for their neurodiversity. They see the ignorance in the alpha ideology, both of women and men. They see the superiority of a culture and the creation of a race in the Eurocentric era of that Romanesque empire, and the creation of race out of that by the Eurocentric British issues, and how colonization came out of that race conversation they created. Like, there are many men that see that. They're already my friends. They're already talking to me. They're already in my network. I'm not here to convince any of them. But I will say that I do need to speak in a language where the people who are on the border that are too scared to leave that system yet, or have bought in enough where they're so invested that they will see the business. They will see the way that they can make money off of what I'm saying. Got to play that game until we have enough of our own financial liquidity in the market to just be the most logical where to go, because that predator class will eat themselves. And the people who are not quite in that predator class but wish they were, like they're believing that maybe they can be part of it, they're close enough, but they hear us, and they understand we're on this spectrum, that predator class is really not above anyone. If anything, it's like inverted. Like they're literally creating the world where they can invert their significance because there's so few of them, and they've extracted everything they are. They don't even generate it. They're not the generators. They manifest, but they're not the generators. They project, but they're not the generators. Nature is the generator. Women are the generator. The non-neuronormatives of the world are the generators. The critical thinkers are the generators. They are the majority in every shape and form and color and gender and identity. That's the reality. And so I don't need to convince anyone who is like, that's not my job. That was, I thought, my job, and that may be other people's roles right now. But in the world of AI, there are new roles to be taken, and I'm taking one. I did it when I went in from pain and body and through the 90s and took that into that idea that I saw in athletes to be able to kind of overcome their physical structural limits because of the infrastructure in the athletic competitivism. Like, I see that. I understand that. That's where I'm going. And if that's you, you're going to hear me already. You're going to be like, let me read her Substack. You're going to let me know about you, even if my Substack's not like necessarily where you're at in terms of like health politics and women and uses of power and the dynamics of the healthcare and the care economy and community health and medicine and where this is like, if you're like deep in finances, you're still a part of my conversation and you know it already. I already see where we're talking the same language, but maybe you're just my really good friend and you're creating collaborative projects for people who are in my intimate community. Maybe I'm helping you create the somatic embodiment that will sustain the people in your community that are recreating the economics. This is how I see this working with me. I'm either your consult, if you're interested in my Substack and in me, you're either my client for being a project consult, my collaborator, my partner already in something. You are someone who is, if you're going to employ me for something, if you're going to support me, it's because you feel somewhat powerless or overwhelmed, and you like that I have some structure and frameworks and things that you could already work off of in your communities because you want to do the same thing. But I'm not convincing and being an influencer. Like, I'm not looking to manipulate you. Never was. I'm as real as it gets. Like, I seriously am not. I am saying that. People who know me outside of my public perspective, they know this is not just my public persona. In fact, people who know me are kind of probably surprised because how much of the time I'm more introverted and away from people in my public persona. I can see in both accounts the commonality is that they'd say, if anybody's going to be called a bitch, a witch, a troublemaker, a person who thinks they know it all, like whatever you want to come at me at. When really I'm just a very intelligent, well educated um, woman who has done a tremendous amount of work to stay grounded, who has lost a tremendous amount doing it the right way with the wrong people, and also doing the wrong things with the right people out of ignorance and timelines and just like, I've got nothing to prove to anyone about this. I'm just here saying it now because there are people who are not as brave as me, who are not willing to risk what I am willing to obviously risk, who are overwhelmed, who have not done, like I taught yoga as a system of living as well as a personal regulation system. So when everybody's out here talking about neuroregulation right now, I'm like, old news. Anyone who's worked with me, either because they were burning out professionally or trying to start something new with their career pivot, or just a mommy who's overwhelmed, who is a stay at home now, who has a lot more to offer and needs to figure out like how she's relevant in that new world, in her new world order of kids. I walked those paths and I created a business out of it. I created a blue ocean market out of it. I'm here now doing the same thing. But whereas before there was a lot of feeling of convincing because I was new on the field, right? Like I had to like just prove myself as a like professional. I'm not doing that now. I have thousands of people who benefited from my skill level as a clinician. If you can't see that, if you don't want to ask me a question, if you don't put my name in and find a podcast I was on, and you don't want to have a conversation with me and ask me questions clinically and see how I answer them, I can't help that. Like, believe what you want. Go look at my records in school and go talk to my old bosses. If you don't think I'm valid because, like, I'm not a famous yoga therapist, I'm not screaming and talking so much the past few years since the pandemic, since I pulled back and I kind of wanted to understand corporate better, wanted to understand AI, what was coming on the scene and NFTs. Like I wanted to understand because I saw the change. If you have not been communicating and networking with me and done anything with me through LinkedIn and that professional aspect, I can't help it now. Like you can ask me questions if you'd like to have conversation personally with me to weed me out. Like all I could do is say to go to www.drlisahollandpt.com and scroll down to ask for a proposal and click on it. Like if you need me to do something in order to do that, then you need to like email the email for this, which is mindbody and mindbodyeoffice7@gmail.com. You need to just go to my website and just click on whatever, like just fill out a form. Like, but if you can't do that, like I have to like prove some, like not my person, like you're definitely not going to be on board with where I say we need to go in infrastructure. Like you're definitely not, if you're not comfortable enough to have a conversation with me personally to learn more, that something's intriguing, that you're hearing something, that maybe I'm not communicating it well enough in the realm you're working in and you're not sure, you're definitely not somebody I'm going to be able to like work with right now for where we are. This is a very critical time at the intersection of healthcare, AI technologies, geopolitical shifts. All of them are talking about power and authority. All of them are on my sacred success path structure. And all of them are going towards that same abundance, but only one of those conversations, like if you're still stuck in empire and ownership and power centralization and like patriarchy and the utility of that for you, I'm going to tell you right now, you're we're not in the same conversation. You're not even here right now listening to me 36 minutes into this. But I'm going to end it here. I'm going to end it here. Um, I thank you for being here. I hope that you do uh, look up my Substack either under my name here, Lisette Alvarez Holland, at Dr. Lisette Alvarez Holland, or you could look at Curvy Hustle on Substack. The Curvy Hustle at Curvy Hustle, both of those. You'll end up in the same place. And we'll start there. That's all I'm asking for. Be a contributor, be a supporter of my Substack, and help me do what I need to do. Help me be the woman I need to be in order to do that, the things that we discuss in terms of, like I said, um, be at the narrative layer, be at the action layer, and be at the systems layer right now at that intersection. As a woman, yes, I'm asking men to support the women to do that, because honestly, if you see all the damage it's done to you, and you're tired of the patriarchy, and you're tired of the oligarchs, and you're tired of the instability purposely being put in, and the destabilization of the United States Constitution, I will create a market for you. I will create a way for you to work into this.